Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording Modular, and today I am very proud to bring you a video on the Make Noise Multimod. This is a really cool module. Here's what we're going to be getting into before I start talking about the technical stuff. Wonderful. Okay, so what is the Make Noise Multimod? In simplest terms, it takes one signal and copies it 8 times, and then you can modify those copies, their phase and their speed and their spread from each other. If you've ever used Tides, the mode in Tides where it creates 4 LFOs that you can then shift out of phase with each other, you get the basic idea, but that is literally the tip of the iceberg when it comes to multimod. This thing can get very, very wild. Before we get into making sounds, I want to explain the basics of how this works, because while on the surface it's simple enough, it can get really, really wild quick, and I'm saying wild so many times, but that's the best word I can put for it. So let's go over the panel and how it works, and then we'll get into patching. So with nothing patched into the in signal right here, Multimod will generate shapes based on this shape button right here. And these are the shapes that you can get. Right now you see we have a ramp that is red. Here is a sawtooth. Here is a triangle, blue, and then purple is a sine, pink is a square, and orange, ooh, yeah, look at that, stepped random. Hey, Editing Jeremy here. I forgot to call out my favorite mode, which is right after orange. It's yellow, and that is ramplets. We'll be using those a lot later. It's one of the best modes for the stuff I'll be showing you. There are some further nuances to each shape, but we'll get into that later. When you patch something into the input, Multimod will sample that input and output a new signal. In that case, the shape control dictates how the module will read through the input wave and generate a new one. Here's a simple sine wave going through each shape. That's fun. So you can see the sine wave, but you can also see how each shape goes through it and creates a new wave, which is pretty damn cool. Are you beginning to get excited already? Like, those of you that dig modulation should already be excited about this. The time control can be thought of as a global write and read speed. It will dictate how fast the shapes are created. With nothing plugged into the clock input, this is the speed of the shape that you've selected with the shape control. So, as you might expect, over here to the left, it's a fast friend. And then over here on the right, it slows down. So the faster it is, the faster it can read changes in the incoming waveform. So I have an OCHD signal going through here right now. And you can see, now that I've sped up OCHD really, really fast, and the time here is really, really fast, it's able to read and write that really fast. If I slow this down, it's going to be a bit different. Slow down this here. Yeah. So there's a relationship between the input wave. Oh, that looks like fun. And the input wave and the time thing. But if you just want to use this as a generator, then time is your main control for the speed of the shape that's being created. And it can go really slow, and it can go really fast. Look at those LEDs go. I love the LEDs on this thing. That's one thing I really, really dig about this module. Spread, this big knob here, sets the divisors and multipliers of each new copy of the original signal. At noon, where we're at right now, it's equal across all 8 outputs. You can see the color coding here. La la la. To the left, the channels start stretching from 1 being the slowest to 8 being the fastest. The traces here going into data, it's 1, 3, 6, and 8. So I'm trying to give you a spread across the entire output of Multimod. If you go over to the right, then it's the opposite, with 1 ending up being the fastest and 8 being the slowest. And of course, time affects all of these. Okay, so real quick, you'll notice now that even though we're back in the center for spread, that all of our signals, I don't want to call them just LFOs, that they are out of phase with each other. They should be in phase. I mean, they could be in phase. And the way that you can get them back is by hitting the reset button. So there's a reset input. The visual language of Make Noise is that if you see something with a bunch of circles around it, it's probably going to take a trigger or a gate. And in this case, trigger or gate will work. Phase takes these and puts them out of phase with each other. the spacing of the signal copies. This is like the shift in tides. At full counterclockwise, which is where we are right now, all the channels are in phase. And at full clockwise, all channels are evenly spread out of phase, with channels 1 and 8 being fully 180 degrees out of phase from each other. When spread is set to noon, phase is indicated by the color of the activity window of the associated channel becoming more red as its phase spacing increases. So you'll notice how this one is very red and this one is not. And that red means it's real out of phase. There we go. You can see that we have these out of phase copies with each other. This is really similar to that mode in tides, where you can have 4 signals out of phase with each other. To get it to be a weirder shape, like you can with tides, then what we could do is turn spread up, and we could also introduce, any kind of signal we wanted into this to kind of mess with the shape a little bit, like this. Now we get some weirder stuff. Ooh, that is fun. Look at that. And I know there's no sound right now. Don't worry. There'll be plenty of opportunity for that. I really just want you to wrap your head around how this works before we get into that. Okay, cool. Finally, we have tempo, which is a clock input. It's going to sync the module to an external clock and allows us timed versions of all the controls we've talked about here. And this is how we are going to start our first sonic patch. Finally, I'd like to draw attention to this little friend right here. Let's go ahead and trace this into 1. Take a look at the green trace right there. You'll see that it's kind of stepping up and down while the rest of these are doing different things. I'll go ahead and select this and I'll move it so you can really see it. There you go. So there you go. Try to speed this up. So that weird little output right there is the channel index out. The channel with the highest amplitude at any given time is represented at this output, coded by voltage, 1 to 8 volts representing the 8 channels. And when tempo is patched, this output will only update on the onset of each tempo clock, which is obviously very useful. Make Noise says that this channel index will be of greater use with the forthcoming new universal synthesizer system modules, which I haven't mentioned up until now, but Multimod here represents the first module in the new module ecosystem for Make Noise, which is super cool. Also, this is my first video sponsored by Make Noise, so thank you, Make Noise, for having me along for this module's launch. With that said, let's take what we've learned here from a just theoretical standpoint and put it into practice with the modules that I have next to Multimod. Okay, well, here we are. I am using the Piston Honda wavetable oscillator into QPass into mimeophone. This will be our filtering eventually. I'll add some of the delicious delay here in a bit, but first of all, let's get to know how some of these shapes sound. I picked the Piston Honda here because it has 3 inputs to make very big changes to the sound. It'll be really obvious when we mess around with something. And yeah, we're going to be using 4 outputs for that. And then we can add more if we want. We still have 4 extra outputs of Multimod we haven't assigned anywhere yet. But first of all, let's get to hear what this sounds like with its clocked, play with some of the shapes, etc. So in order to do that, first, let's go ahead and get our time synced up. I am using an 8th note right now, an 8th note clock into it. That looks like a quarter note that we got on there. So let's go ahead and start turning up some modulation. So right now, all of our outputs are in sync with each other and at the same time and all that kind of stuff. Let's play with spread first. It's really exciting to just all of a sudden get these really interesting interactions. And turn this down. Get some of that as well. So with spread, since some of them are going to be faster and some of them slower, you can get modulation inside modulation, which is frankly really neat. Let's try some different shapes. The downward shape sounds really good. some good movement. Now, one interesting thing happens when you start modulating phase in this situation. So I'll go ahead and put a sine wave into phase real quick. You can see that we start to get some really weird waveforms out of that. Let's try some different shapes. I really like stepped. Being able to do 8 channels of stepped random with different relationships with each other is great. Yeah. So what about these other outputs? Well, they can go wherever you want. I forgot about this one. I can call this out. This has a little ramped random thing going on. So there is a small taste of what this thing sounds like with just a small handful of modules. The point here is that with one thing, even with no input, you can create a really, really rich, complex modulated voice all from one place. And, well, not even just voice, situation. We're going to get into more situations here in a bit. That's the point. I think it sounds badass. With all of our sort of demo patches out of the way, our educational patches out of the way, now we can get creative. Fun. Protogens be like, okay, so I always go really big in the first one, and I'm like, oh no, that was too big. There was too much stuff going on to really have people understand what I was trying to do with it. So I've stripped this back down to a smaller patch, sort of. Basically what's going on here is the Multimod is connected through a new attenuator that I got from Vostok called the Acid. And that is attenuating 6 of the signals. I don't have my Avalon Harmonics attenuator yet, unfortunately. I'd be using that if I had it. But those 6 signals are going to the Modbap Osiris and the Q-Pass. And I've got a signal coming out of Maestro here going into the Multimod that if I turn this up, you can hear is going to a bunch of different settings on the Osiris. The Osiris is one of my favorite things to use for modulation showcases because it just has so much width and breadth to the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is play around with the amount of signal going in, the flavor of signal going in, and then we'll play around with things like the spread and the phase and stuff like that. I really want you to hear what a super focused but super intense series of modulations do. I've had this in my mind since the Multimod showed up, is these complex techno bass lines where the underlying structure of it is very simple. We've got this, dun 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 thing. But what we're doing on top is going to give it life. So let's start from scratch, meaning no modulation, and bring this in. You've already heard this. So we're installing movement on top of our signal. So first off, we need to introduce some spread. Now spread, again, takes one side of the outputs and makes them faster and the other side slower. So I can go all the way over here and over here and get different outputs. If it's too wobbly and fast, which I think in this case is, I can turn up the time. And now you can hear that we have a slower wobbly expression. That's so fucking weird. Okay, and last up we have phase. So if I put spread right up at noon again, now everything is back together and I can play with phase. And just get these really wild modulation rhythms. We haven't even fucked with shape over there yet, so let's play with some different shapes. Tricky is just trying to find those really weird rhythmic sweep spots. Now, instead of having QPOS modulated by Multimod, I've now given it an envelope, which makes it very freaking weird. Alright, let's play around this more. So hopefully that brings in a little bit more context for how these modulators sort of all cascade around each other. I've got more planned. Honestly, this module can do so much that it's almost daunting to show it off to you because it's capable of so many awesome things. So let's do another patch. Another idea that I got stuck in my head was how could I use Multimod as the source for like a melodic sequence throughout the rack, and I came up with this pretty insane patch in terms of routing, not insane in terms of conceptuality, but let me just explain it to you real quick. So we have a signal coming out of Maestro like we did before, going into Multimod. Multimod is clocked. We're pretty slow, around 80 BPM right now, but I don't really want tempo to be a part of this. So this signal is going into Multimod to be sampled, and we are clocking Multimod, and all of the outputs of Multimod that I can fit into our attenuators are going in there, and then going into the Ornament and Crime Quantermain quantizer. That's getting triggers to pick a note from the OCHD right here. And as I increase and decrease this, what's going to happen is the CV that's going into our quantizer to be sampled will increase. But as you can see, this is also getting sped up and down here from signal from Multimod. And then finally, 4 of our oscillators, plates, braids, Zephyr, I guess it's 3 of our oscillators with the remaining signals, are getting run through a VCA with additional signals from Multimod modulating them. So right now everything's kind of in lockstep. You can hear that pizza isn't because I didn't have enough channels to do a out of Multimod VCA LFO for that, but Tides is doing that one, so that was just kind of operating independently. So as I do this over here, we're going to start getting some very interesting relationships as these start to spread out and get different signals. So let's play around. Let's turn up spread first. Cool, let's turn up time. There we go, that's cool. Really complex interactions between all the stuff that Multimod is doing within itself and then passed out to these other devices. That's super cool. We're using, I believe, the triangle wave shape over on Multimod, but I could change that. This is a more stepped. It almost sounds like I'm running everything in some kind of crazy effect. But really, it's just a combination of interrelated modulation signals, quantizers, and VCAs. But I think it makes a very quintessentially modular sounding patch. That's really cool. Okay, so got me thinking, since we can process CV with this thing, and volt per octave is CV, that means we could theoretically process pitch sequences through this, and I thought we'd give it a try. So, I have a pitch sequence going into Multimod. You can hear it right now, that sort of upwards arpeggiator thing. Multimod is clocked, and we're sending the 8 outputs out to Pizza, the Cruin plates, and the Quellic Iteratus Persido. And right now, everything is normal. I have all of my controls for, what do you say, spread, phase, and time down here. I have it on the ramp up shape right now, and it's getting a 8th note clock. So what I want to do is I want to start manipulating the controls of Multimod to see how this now takes this CV sequence, this 1 volt per octave sequence, and starts manipulating it and delaying it and transferring it around to different things. We'll go ahead and add the reset signal in there as well, which is set to a rhythm at the moment, and just see how it goes. So, yeah. Whoa, okay, so that was just phase. Okay, hold on, this is getting out of hand. That's phase. And let's turn time up. Yes. So as I suspected, it's taking that signal, sampling it, delaying it, moving it around in time, and passing it off to our different oscillators now in a sort of phase-shifted version. It's passing it down the 8 outputs in time. I also have a couple of these outputs going to CV modulation destinations, like Plates has 2 of its things being modulated, its controls being modulated, and Iteratus Persido, well, Quellic Iteratus Persido over here does too. So that's cool as hell. Let's try some spread. So now we can hear that on one end, the sequences are moving faster, on the other end they're moving slower. That's so cool. And we can bring it back to not being affected at all. There's a couple other things I want to try. Let's get our reset going in here. Our reset signal, excuse me, which is a gate very strange. Let's change shape and see what happens. Let's downward ramp. So, as we take spread, and we make one side very quick, it's trying to continually do a very fast version of the pitch sequence, but the reset signal is keeping it from continually going. So we get these little glissandos, which is pretty neat. So what I want to do now is take all of these and run them through their own individual VCA to get some like motion on them that's rhythmic. I want to see how that feels real quick. So bear with me, I'm just get this hooked up. Each one of these is going to go into my VCA, and I'm going to give it a 16th note envelope. Multimod is receiving a pitch sequence from her mod. Right now it's like an arpeggiated sequence. That is getting passed into Multimod and spread and phased. Out to 4 different oscillators and some modulation. And what we're getting is this new series of sequence based on the fact that Multimod is clocked and that there's a shape that it's sampling our input from, and it's sort of cascading around the different oscillators. Really, really like that. That's bizarre. So now, if I just play stuff, it just gets completely mangled by Multimod. Okay, well that's really weird. Not exactly what I expected. But I'll say that the CV manipulation, the pitch sequence manipulation, did turn out pretty cool. So, hooray for that. Let's go to the next patch. One extremely fun patch that is in the manual as of now that you recommend that you try is sending noise into the Multimod and seeing what happens when you start playing around with things like spread and time. And yeah, it's really wild. So right now I have a signal coming out of noise plethora going into Multimod. And if I turn time up, you'll hear that. I'm going to go ahead and get a signal in there so that we can do that from over where I am sitting. There we go. Cool. And then spread. That's so wild. And then we'll do phase as well. So crazy. Okay. So now we're back to the ramp shape. So wild this can do audio rate for this. Let's clock this real quick and see what happens then. Very wild. Very, very cool. Now I'm playing with the cutoff frequency on the signal going into Multimod, so the noise plethora noise source. That's so wild. Okay, so if we can do noise, does that mean that we can do an oscillator? Let's put Zephyr into here and see what happens. Okay. So, what happens now if I turn one of these controls? Let's start with time. Oh my god, what the hell? Holy shit. Oh my god, okay. Let's give this a pitch sequence. Okay, I'm gonna turn up spread. Are you fucking kidding me? Y'all, I had no idea this thing could work as an audio processor. This is wild. So it's taking that signal, that pitch sequence, and turning it into 8 harmonically related signals. And I'm assuming the shape that's generating that is dictated by our clock here. So let's go ahead and yeah, okay. So the faster the sample rate of the clock, the faster resolution you can sample the incoming signal in. So if I was to put a reset signal into reset that was sort of like a tempo-based reset signal, I bet we get some interesting results. Yep, okay. So reset plays a really, really big role in how Multimod responds to your system. And you can put patterns in there. You can do all kinds of interesting things. Here's a pattern going in there. Where's that thing? Whoa, that's beautiful. It's creating harmonies. This is bonkers, y'all. Wow. So I'm playing with the 3 settings going into Multimod. Let me give you a view of this. This is spread. And this is phase. Let's try some different shapes. I love that subtle bit right there. The out of phase, so it creates almost like delays when it's just out of phase. Which means it's harmonizing with itself. That makes perfect sense. Instead of adding any sort of additional push-pull to the timing, it's just phasing the input signal 8 times out of sync with each other. This is that triangle, I believe, so you're getting a scratchy pitch effect. Yeah. Okay, I'm just absolutely smitten with this. And it makes me wonder, what are drums gonna sound like? Okay, let's see what a little bit more syncopation is like. And then, of course, we can reset it. So cool! You can hear that reset pattern now. Holy shit. Hear that change in the hi-hat propagate across the channels as it ripples. It truly is like a delay. I'm smitten, y'all. Listen to that beautiful little melody at a triangle wave coming out of Zephyr. And some noise coming out of Noise Plethora. I wanted to make a really sort of unclocked, beautiful little signal that we could manipulate with Multimod, now that we know that it can take audio and move it around harmonically in time. So like before, I have some control voltage going into Multimod to adjust things like time and spread and phase. From my FIR down here. The first one's time. Now we're volting Multimod unclocked, so finding a sweet spot here where... Ooh, already getting some delay. That's nice. Let's try some phase. Cool. Awesome. Now let's introduce spread. Gotta find the spot where it actually harmonically locks back in. Because we're creating these like pitch shifted copies, but they don't necessarily have a relationship that's tonal to our original. Oh wow, that's wild. Of course our shape matters quite a bit here. This is so weird. There we go. Yellow mode works really well for this. I really like that. Turning phase up all the way and having these things kind of just play off each other is really beautiful. So crazy. Wait for everything to catch up when you turn the time down really, really low. That's so cool. Cool. So we know that yellow is a great shape for this particular exercise. We also know that green goes backwards in time, which is just really cool. So you'll be able to hear copies moving in reverse, which for a module, again, that bills itself as control voltage manipulation, or, you know, when you see mod, you expect, oh yeah, it's control voltage. But yeah, here it is, just taking audio and reversing it and spreading it over channels and making this wonderful wash. That's so cool. Last thing I want to try with this particular sequence is hitting the reset while we're doing this, and tempo. Because this, while there's a clock going on, this sequence isn't clocked. And I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens if we installed a rhythm on top of it. So, first and foremost, let's give this a clock. All right. We'll take this quarter note clock and put it into the reset. Now let's spread time out and spread out. Really takes that low ones and makes them very low, and the top ones get very, very high. Ooh! Oh, it's Data Bender all over again. Really, really cool. I really love that. So that's with yellow, which we know works. I'm going to go through the shapes real quick. That's our upward ramp. Wow. What a cool reinterpretation. Downward ramp. You know, this one moves backwards in time. Oh, those little pitch whips. This is so cool. All right, well, I love this. I need to take a few days and think of what I want to do if there's going to be any more patches to this. I'm pretty sure I'll do at least one more to just sort of, you know, wrap things up, but this is so cool. It's really hard for me to think of how I'm going to beat this. Make Noise, you made a really, really interesting module here. All right, cool. Well, next patch, I guess. Okay, so I got in my head that, hey, a saw wave has a ramp wave has a very strong leading edge and could be used as a trigger. And what would it be like if I used Multimod as a distributed phasing trigger network? And then I realized that it has a mode that does gates. So I'm like, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. So what I've done here is I've set up Multimod to set up 8 channels out to the Bitbox Micro. And the Bitbox Micro has the same sort of marimba sample that has been pitched and panned across 8 different channels. And right now, you can hear that it's just getting a clock according to the tempo. We're using a quarter note clock to make this really obvious in terms of what's going to happen when I start moving stuff around. I have, again, our voltage offset generators down here going to the Multimod and timing, phase, how cool is that, right? Steve Reich up in here. A little bit of time and phase gets things even wilder. And then we have spread. How cool is that? So I was like, oh man, this is like really kind of like a classic sort of slippy, weird brand of minimal techno that I used to really like. I'm not making minimal techno right now, but with a little bit of extra backing here, and we can get some interesting stuff. I've got bass coming from the Instro Crew-In through the Freak Manifold filter. Okay, let's play around a bit more. Triplets, which is really cool. So, of course, we can create polyrhythms and polymeters all day with this thing, which is super cool. But if we reintroduce the reset in a rhythmic pattern, then we're going to get some more interesting locking grooves that instill themselves upon this. So here's our reset signal. And if I go to this, I can make anything I want. Let's see if I can make this really obvious. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so now it's always going to pin to those events, so to speak. Pin going back to sort of all syncing together. So no matter what we do with the rest of the craziness, it's still going to stick to those points, and we'll have a concept of the tempo there. I just think it's really, really cool to be able to use something like this to discover new rhythms. It's a Swiss Army knife of things that I probably haven't even thought of everything that you can do with it yet. I thought that was cool. Use Multimod as a polymetric and polyrhythmic phasing Reichian time processor. God, I love sea legs. Okay, so we know this thing can do gate processing, meaning it can create gates, so we can create polymeters and polyrhythms and all that stuff. That was when it was clocked, was what we heard last time. I had an idea about creating a patch where it fed gates to a bunch of modules that could be triggered or gated, and slipping around within those gates with the time and spread control to create cascading up and down motions. So that's what we have here. Surface, elements, rings, and loquelic iteratus percedo are all getting gate signals. And what I'm going to do is move over to the other side of the rack and turn on the tracks, which are going to send 2 notes to each one over a period of time. And I'm going to play with the spread in time so you can hear what it sounds like to create sort of these weird polyrhythmic, musical beds with this thing. Already you can hear right now that we have a very interesting sort of unrelationship between all this, which I think is super, super cool. Almost like wind chimes, right? Okay, so I'll go over there and I'll just play this for you for about a minute. So yeah, that's it. Just a quick little demonstration that you can create some really beautiful and interesting polyrhythmic material. I think it should be really, really cool with just percussion generators. So if you had a set of digital or analog percussion generators that you really liked, throwing them all at this could be really cool. You could get sort of a polyrhythmic drumming thing going on. Anyways, on to the next one. Okay, so I knew I had to do something weird. So here's a weird little cluster of things receiving modulation from Multimod. The XPO is sending out to QPOS into Mimeophone. And we're using all the outputs of Multimod, going to those places in various things like timbre of XPO, low pass filter frequency, and some aspects of Mimeophone. What I can do is on my attenuverters down here, Maestro here, turn some up, and we'll increase the modulation of Multimod itself and the voltage that's going to Multimod. And we're going to start hearing some very fun interactions because time, spread, and phase are all being modulated by their own voltage chains, their own modulation chains coming out of Maestro. And so everything is just constantly shifting and being wiggled around, which I think is really, really fun. Very, very silly. Sounds like a billion circles talking at once. Oh my god, that's so wild. What I wanted to do is change some of the shapes over on Multimod to hear how this is going to affect our patch. So let's do that. That's I take the one out of rate here, and I use this to modulate a stereo VCA. And I'm going to take the outputs of XPO, put them into that stereo VCA. Talking into a microphone when you can't hear yourself because you've got a different system recording your voice and the modular. Definitely a fun experience. Yeah. That's the weirdness I like. Let the air out of the balloon, baby. Okay, I think we get the point. You can get very, very odd with it, which is always good. Well, here we are at what I assume is going to be the last patch for this video. I've got well over 2 hours of material recorded for this that I'm happy to edit down for you to show you what this thing can do. Honestly, there's probably a bunch of other really cool stuff that's going to be shown off today, so make sure that you check out the Make Noise video on the Multimod and whomever else has uploaded a video today. And keep an eye out in the future because I guarantee you there's going to be things that people figure out how to do with this module that I have not come up with today. It's just really cool. This last patch, I'm going to hit play and I'll tell you what's going on. Okay, qubit surface up there is passing into a molt. 1 molt is going into the Dnipro just for some reverb before it goes into the Multimod. Chill that out there. The other half of it is going into some effects which are dry right now, and then into here. All 8 outputs of the Multimod are processing that audio signal and coming into here, which is going to give us the opportunity to phase them and pitch shift them and all kinds of stuff. The percussion that you're hearing is from Winter Plankton Zaps. with some modulation. I love this module. It just sounds really good when you just need some kind of like Mother 32-esque kind of sequence. And that's it. Let's start playing around with this, and I'm going to add effects, play with time. Oh yeah, I guess I wanted to show you, like, it's wild that this thing can turn into like basically like a shimmer echo. I was talking to Walker on email, and he was like, yeah, we really designed it for CV in mind, but I guess it does audio as well. I think he's super downplaying the interesting stuff that you could do with audio with this. So hopefully I've given you a taste of that today. This pitch shifting delay thing is super cool. All right, I'm gonna bring in some effects. That is Starlab going into C-Legs. All right, that's it. I'm going to play with this and add some overdubs and have 30 seconds of a jam out, and that'll be the end of the video. Thank you, Make Noise, for having me on board for this launch. Super, super cool. Thank you, everybody who has watched the end. Check the video links in the description for anything interesting that you might be interested in. And I'll talk to you soon. My name is Jeremy. Red means recording modular. Have a wonderful day.